I asked CHAP GPT to rank the 10 most common fitness questions. These are my answers, starting with part 1, which is questions 1 to 5, and then part 2, 5 to 10. Question number 1 was, how often should I work out? So let's keep this simple. First things first is be active every day. That's things like walking, just general movement, super important. After this, 3 times a week is good. You can get things done with 3 times a week. This should be mainly resistance training. If you can do 4 times a week, again, this is going to be mainly resistance training, but you can add some conditioning work into this as well. And if you can do 5 days a week, which is fantastic, then again, even more resistance work, but you need to be carefully planning your routine. You need to incorporate conditioning again, but also some future proofing of your body. So let's break this down a little bit. First, like I said, the most important thing is just to be active. This is the single most overlooked thing when it comes to just general health. The way we live our lives nowadays is geared around Netflix shows and office work, or for most people. If you have the luxury of having an active job that isn't too mentally punishing, then it's a real bonus. But by and large, most people need to go to extra efforts just to be active. So a simple tip you can do is set your alarm. If you're an office worker, for example, every 30 minutes, just get up and move, just walk around a little bit, get back, set your alarm. It keeps, and it really does make a huge difference to your overall daily energy expenditure. Now, if you have that in the bag, then we have the luxury of working out 3 days a week. If you're only training 3 days a week, then the main focus should be on resistance work, because this will give you the biggest bang for your buck. You can do cardio. I'm not saying don't do cardio work or conditioning work, but your main focus should be on resistance work. Think of it this way. When it comes to cardiovascular training, more your traditional stuff like treadmill, rowing, spin bike, all that kind of stuff. Think of that as more like it's just energy out. You're in the gym, you expend this much energy, great. When it comes to resistance training, the difference is resistance training is not only energy out by you doing the movements and, hopefully at a high pace. You also have the added benefit that your body then needs to recover, rebuild, and repair from the exercises you've done. Like the resistance, basically, you need to get a bit stronger. Nutrients need to come in, and it has a metabolic cost. So it's by far better to do resistance training than just cardio. Now, if you have the luxury of 4 days a week, this is where you can start adding a little bit more conditioning work. Priority should be on your resistance training, but instead of you maybe going for a 3-day split, you can do a 4-day split routine. You can break the body up a little bit more, and you can add specific workouts that have maybe 10-15 minutes of conditioning work at the end to improve your fitness levels as well as not just your muscle mass. Now, when it comes to 5 days a week, this can create as many problems as it can solutions, because when people have more time to train out, they end up doing more and more and more. And this is where you have to think about the future version of yourself. Fast forward 10 years, you don't want to be cursing yourself and why did you treat me this way 10 years ago, blasting me with these ridiculous workouts. With 5 days a week, you have the real opportunity to make really good, long-lasting changes in your body. So you should really be looking at, again, priority is resistance training, as always, but then you can add more of the conditioning work, even more of a split, and even more future-proofing exercises. So instead of you just coming in, if you do a 3-day week, you spend 5 minutes warming up, you're limited time, you've got to go in, lift, blah, blah, blah. In the 5-day workout, you might think, right, I've got 5 shots, 5 hours of this. So I can spend maybe 15 minutes just preparing my body. I can do some more mobilization work, some preparation work. I can even add some speed and some power work into there to have a bit more functionality. And then you have your kind of recovery protocol as well, your kind of cool down methods and how you unwind after the session, because you have the luxury of extra time. So use it well. That's number 1. Question number 2 is, how long should I work out for? This is one of those kind of how long is a piece of string exercises. It depends on what you're training for, and it depends on realistically how much time you can allot to training. You can achieve a lot in just 15 minutes, but 15 minutes of working out usually involves a lot of HIIT training and jumping, which long term is unsustainable. If you were to take at a bare minimum maybe 30 minutes, that doesn't include warming up or your session preparation, 30 minutes of exercise is a good number because you can achieve a lot in that 30 minutes. Having said that, if you can push to an hour, it's obviously going to be even better. Things to consider on this, though, is obviously if you had 30 minutes for a novice is going to be very different to what 30 minutes of an intermediate or advanced exerciser can achieve. Because obviously when you're starting off, you're going to find it tough. You have to have longer rest periods. You can't work too hard or you enter the green zone. So you have to pace it. If you're in an intermediate or advanced, you can get a lot done in 30 minutes of supersets, back-to-back, almost no rest. But it takes dedication and fitness to reach that kind of level. So going back to basics, 1 hour session might include something like 5 to 10 minutes of warming up, 5 to 10 minutes of preparation total. Some primary exercises, some conditioning exercises for your last 10, 15 minutes. It's going to take you up to about an hour, with around about 45 minutes of that being hard work. Question number 3 is, how do I build lean muscle mass? This question is all about energy balance. Muscle just doesn't grow out of thin air. It needs the right kind of workouts and the right kind of energy input. In this case, what we're looking at is enough protein, probably around about 1 gram per pound of lean body mass, and adequate energy either from the foods we consume or from our existing energy stores to encourage rebuilding and repairing. So it helps to think of this on a sliding scale. The more calories you consume, yes, the more muscle you will probably gain, but you'll also gain fat as well. If you reduce the calories but still keep them in a slightly positive state, as long as protein levels are high, you should gain lean muscle mass. So it's all about finding this kind of sweet spot where you're consuming enough calories to encourage repair and rebuild, but not encouraging the kind of laying down of new fat. This is why traditionally most people or most bodybuilders do the old-fashioned bulk, where they'll go off-season, where they'll eat plenty of food, they'll get a little bit fat, and then they will go 12 weeks, they'll strip it down and see how much muscle they're left with. Number 4, which is the best diet for weight loss? This one, if you're watching this as a short, you're not going to get the full answer. You'd have to watch the full video. But this is traditionally approached from 3 different ways. You have your traditional calorie deficit only. Option 2 would be a calorie deficit slightly less than just the calorie deficit, because you're also going to add exercise. And option 3 would be to not worry so much about your calories in and focus more on good quality food and more activity. Each of those, though, has a problem. With the first option, you're relying solely on exercise as your means of putting yourself into a calorie deficit. This probably will mean that you will lose muscle mass. And although it might be easier to do in terms of it's the only thing you need to think about is diet, you'll lose muscle mass. And if you lose muscle mass, you can have consequences to this. One, you won't look particularly good if you lose muscle mass, especially if you don't have much muscle mass in the first place. And the other side of it is as you reduce weight, you will gradually, if you're also losing muscle mass, you'll also find it harder and harder to continue losing weight. It's like downgrading the size of the engine in your car. It takes less petrol. Option number 2, which is the one traditionally most people go for, it's to introduce exercise. So you need a lesser calorie reduction than if your calorie reduction is your main focus, because you're also going to add exercise. Adding exercise also introduces excess calorie expenditure through the exercise alone. And if done correctly through resistance work, it should also maintain or even in some cases build muscle mass. But obviously the problem with this is you have to exercise, and that takes an additional level of complications or commitments. Third option, and arguably the best, but probably the hardest overall to do, is to not so much worry about food, as long as you're eating good quality whole foods and plenty of protein, is to continue to eat those good quality foods in generous amounts, but be very active. That includes working out at least 4 times a week, and ideally being active every single day. Now, obviously, if you're a kind of office worker, that's going to be very difficult. You have to make a real commitment to that kind of lifestyle. But my preference would be number 3. Question number 5 was, how can I lose belly fat? So first things first on this one is, I pretty much answered this in question number 4. You have 3 different options. It's up to you to choose which one is going to be the most appropriate. But what I will say is the biggest tip will be to don't waste your time trying to lose belly fat by working your belly. It doesn't work like that. It's going to cost you energy. The abdominals are a relatively small muscle group. So if you spend valuable time in the gym working on a very small muscle group, it's going to rob you of time where you could spend working on much larger muscle groups, burning much more calories and much more high energy output. When it comes to fat, the obsession obviously is stomach, 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 because at the end of the day, you store your fat in the center of your gravity. Because if you stored all your fat on your arm, there'd be consequences. You'd be walking around like Quasimodo. The trouble is because you store fat on your stomach, differences there take longer to be noticeable. You'll notice differences to your face, the fat on your arms, your outer extremities before you will necessarily on the visuals in the mirror. But what you probably will find, though, is that your clothes will tell you a different story. So you will be definitely losing size around the belt, the waistline, without necessarily seeing much of a difference.